in my mind, symbolism is not very well understood. And part of the reason is because, well, this is really just the way that Western thought works.
Right.
But, I'm an English teacher sometimes, and you go into an English class, and you will kind of get the idea that a symbol is a coded way of communicating an intellectual idea.
Yeah.
But in reality, the symbol is like intellectual ideas are built on a foundation of symbols. The symbols are not some idea expressed in a secret way, but like they're something that's more significant and more foundational than the idea. And so, I mentioned that in the context of what you're saying about crossing yourself at the mention of the Trinity.
Oh, so you're a Catholic, huh?
Because, it's going the wrong way.
Another discussion for another day, guys.
No, when I'm in the Orthodox Church services, if I'm going to cross myself, I always make sure and look because I know it goes the other direction. but just try to do it the right way. But all I had to look at here was you, and I guess I didn't have the same level of trust in you.
Right.
Anyways, you participate in it, in that action, not because it's like you're going to understand if you participate, but it's like participating in it is that thing itself. That's the actual goal.
Right.
I shouldn't say the actual goal, but I mean like that's more important than your intellectual understanding.
Yeah, which is like the divorce of modern Christianity, I guess you would say, from reality, is like we start separating Christianity from actual experience. We start separating it from something that you're actually engaging in. And so then, the way that you're going to reform your life is by listening to the right teachers, listening to the right sermons. In contrast to that, what Jesus says, the way you're going to reform your life is by worshiping me and by praying to me, and then I'll transform you. But it's like this isn't an abstract concept in the mind of the people who received that teaching from Jesus and from his apostles. It's an actual thing that you do. There's physical actions involved with it. If you're reading the Old Testament, it's obvious in the Old Testament, there's physical actions at every step of the way in prayer and worship. There's even a lot of the words in Hebrew that we translate as prayer and worship involves some kind of physical action. Maybe it's lifting up your hands, or maybe it's bowing down, or maybe it's kneeling. I don't know, you'd know the Hebrew better than I would. But there's always a physical aspect to it, and it's the same in Greek for the most part.
Yeah.
But then you'll find that carried over. I guess this is starting to get a little bit into that philosophical realm, but you'll find that carried over in the apostolic fathers and all the way through the fathers and the saints of the church, is that prayer isn't I fold my hands and close my eyes and whisper something in my mind to God. That's not prayer in the mind of ancient Christians. That's not prayer in the minds of the apostles.
Well, I think in a sense it is, but it's
it's part of prayer.
It's okay, so you get this idea, pray continually, and what that kind of opens up to you is that there are degrees of prayer.
Right.
There's the thing that you're doing when you're shutting your eyes and you're whispering something to God, and there's something else that happens as you're engaging in life that can still be a part of a prayer. But you're missing the top the top end of that spectrum. You can begin to see, there is a kind of spectrum of prayer, but it goes way beyond this spot that you're calling prayer.
Right. Yeah. Well, so there's this tendency in Western Christians, whether you're coming from a place of reacting to Roman Catholicism and what is seen as the empty rituals of Roman Catholicism, or if you're Anabaptist, if you're coming from Old Order Amish, the prayers, reciting prayers in German that you don't understand, and having this kind of ritual. It's go to the book and read the prayer, and that's how you pray about something. So that there can be this objection to ritual, but none of that is the sort of ritual that the Bible's talking about. Instead, it's just this engagement with with God as if he were something real and actually present, on something that you can actually connect with. And so like it's not like this Gnostic idea of prayer where God is detached from physical reality, and the only way you're going to pray is just in the mind or just in the emotions or whatever that might be.
Mhm.
I mean, there is like some awareness coming back into Western Christianity. It's like, no, like actions in praise and prayer are actually a thing. And so you'll see people like trying to figure out, okay, what's going on with this whole raising your hands thing.
Mhm. Right.
I see that as overall a positive movement, even if, like some of the times it's like, okay, that's not maybe quite what the apostles were doing, but you're on the right track. So
Mhm.
like good for like, keep going that way.
Mhm.
I don't want to offer
Right.
criticism of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I sort of mentioned this before when it comes to prostration, that you have this idea that when you pray and maybe you bow your head a little bit, you have this idea that like, I'm bowing down before God.
Right.
And then when you actually like go down and put your head on the floor while you're praying, then there's, I mean, for me, there's like this revelation that, oh, I didn't know what it meant to bow before the Lord before I did that with my body.
Yeah.
And so like what that means also is that now when you bow your head down as a part of your prayer, that little action steps into something higher than it was before also, because I understand better what it means to bow than what I did, and what it means to bow in the presence of God than what I did in the past. So now like my heart knows what it means and knows how to do it, even when my full body isn't engaged in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and that reminds me of a couple weeks back when you came and spoke here for us at church.
Mhm.
And you were talking about what worship actually is.
Yeah, I'll mention that a little. And it's some of the comments that David was making about worship words. I mentioned the most common Greek word and the most common Hebrew word that are translated in English Bibles generally as worship don't mean worship, but in both languages the word is prostrate. But I didn't say the word prostrate. I said I'll show you what it means. And I stepped down from here and just got in the middle of the aisle and then bowed down before the cross here. And so demonstrated it rather than explaining the definition of the words.
Right.
And I don't know what the effect was, for the people watching. I mean, it's, interesting demonstration of a point. But for me, when I was there, bowing in the middle of the church, I felt like I wanted to just start crying. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was a very powerful experience for me.
I didn't tell you that Sunday, but I did start crying when you
Yeah.
did that. Like, because it was very, it brought a meaning that wasn't, is not there
Mhm.
otherwise.
Right, yeah.
I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah.
Well, so like there's this temptation, I should say, not tendency. There's this temptation that we have to think that when we become spiritual, we are no longer in need of the bodily things. I mean, I don't think Paul would have agreed with that, but I don't know. I think there's a danger of pride in that. It's like, well, I don't need to actually prostrate on the ground when I pray because I know in my heart that I've prostrated to God. It's like, well, I'm going to challenge you on that. Like, what have you got to lose? Try actually prostrating and you'll find out if you're actually bowing down before God or not.
Mhm.
Like when you
Right.
actually do the physical thing, then you'll learn where your heart actually is. And so like going back to the comment about like, why do I need these things? To me, it's like, you don't know if you need them or not, because they do actually teach you something. Like you said, when your example, actually doing the thing teaches something that talking about it can't. But like, it's the same for me in my own personal prayer. Me physically doing the thing teaches me something that just praying in my mind or praying in my heart can't.
Right.
And like the explanation for that is pretty simple. It's that you're not a soul that is trapped in a body.
Nothing works that way. Like,
Yeah.
if you're going to teach a kid how to throw a baseball, they got to actually throw a baseball with their body. Like,
Right.
I mean, you can give all the instruction, and you could write a book about the proper technique for throwing a baseball, but
Mhm.
but you don't know if you're doing it right until you actually do it.
Well, that's one of the frustrating things about reading like books about how sports were played back in like the late 1800s.
Yeah.
It's like all you have left is your imagination when you read their description. Of
Yeah.
it. Because it's like, well, what, for instance, taking a step this way looked like then versus what we think it looks like now could have been totally different or something.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah, so like, okay, take this to the next step, is that like that's also the danger in having a ideas-based version of Christianity.
Yeah.
And like, here is the doctrines, here is what I'm explaining is right because I've studied the Bible and figured this all out. It's like, well, you don't know whether you're right or not because what you have is not based in experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like, to me, the scripture is pretty clear on this point, and so are like the saints of the church fathers, the witness of the church. Is like, if you want to be a Christian, forget about what you think you know and go and walk with the poor and feed the hungry and give everything that you have away. Like do these extreme acts of love and like live out your Christian life in a thorough and radical way. It's like, then you will learn what is real. Like, then the Bible will start to make sense because you're actually engaging in the things that it's talking about.
one of the things you just said there, David, of the richness of the experience and drawing on the richness of the experience of the saints or the early church fathers. One of the things that I have been enjoying lately is reading some of the stories of saints in the Orthodox Church, or people that the Orthodox Church would refer to as saints. And some of them are more recent, maybe last 300 years. Some of them are maybe 600, 700, and then several of them that I was reading about were like over 1,200 years. But one of the things that was always interesting is that the portrayal of them and the way they practice was always the same all the way throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have the opportunity, or if people will visit a monastery, the monks there will show you the different stations of prayer and things, and they'll tell stories of people from 1,000 years ago praying at this station right here just like they pray today.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's one of the things about the practice that I'm describing, that Dave is describing, is that you do feel like there is some very, very ancient precedent for doing things that way.